And let me just welcome everybody tonight. It's just lovely to have everybody here and so thrilled that Colette could join us. And thank you, Susan, for reaching out to us and, making that connection happen. Really appreciate it. Tonight's virtual Riverside chat will be a little bit different. It'll be more like a conversation. It'll be a conversation with questions and et cetera and so forth. And Julia Kiefer, of my fellow North Bay Rowing Club member, is gonna assist with co-hosting and asking questions and that sort of thing. So let's begin with just sort of a little bit about the upcoming chats before we get into the chat for tonight. Going forward, I just want to let everybody know that the Petaluma Riverside chat video recordings will be accessible to the public via Petaluma Riverside chat YouTube channel, and I put that information in the chat so you can see that. So if you want to share this with anybody, please feel welcome. We've changed it up a little bit, just leveraging this public-facing channel. It provides just a broader platform to attract guest speakers, allowing their work and contributions to be more accessible, with the potential of enhancing viewers' knowledge of rowing, which we're focusing on, as well as guest speakers that are talking about the Petaluma River watershed and what's going on in the greater Petaluma River community. So, and just to remind people, this of course has implications in regards to privacy. So with the videos being public, all virtual participation, questions, comments, it's all recorded and publicly available. So if you would rather not have yourself being public on video or on the microphone, you can turn both of those off and submit your questions to me before the chats in advance. And I put my email in the chat as well, or you can post your questions during the chat. So regarding the upcoming chats, just a little shout out between now and our next chat in early January, we're going to be taking just a short break during the winter holidays. The chat with the U.S. national team member Kendall Chase has been rescheduled for mid-January. Again, the upside of this change is that some of her teammates will be able to join us during the session, since the team will be in training in their Chula Vista bubble at that time. Another attendee and met during these chats, his name is Felix Mullebach. He's captain of the Chaos Rowing, and he's generously arranged and will co-host a panel discussion that we're going to have in early January, on January 6th, on the topic of rhythm from the perspective of guests Rowing Australia coach Andrew Randall, internationally renowned applied sports biomechanist Connie Draper, who's just lovely, and professional athlete and gold medalist Olivia Coffey. And other confirmed but yet to be scheduled chats will be with the Petaluma Small Craft Center, Delta Rowing Center founders and coaches Pat Terone and Bob O'Brandy, share their vision about inclusivity at their boathouse. And Friends of the River executive director will be joining us at some point, including Professor Nicole Myers from Sonoma State, to talk about the geological origins and evolution of the Petaluma watershed. Also, we haven't scheduled a date yet, but Lindsay Shoup, former Olympic rower, will also be joining us. So feel free to contact me for more details or suggestions for possible topics and speakers. I just love to just elevate the conversation in regards to rowing, and it's just pretty exciting stuff. So let me know, emails in the chat. If you'd like right now, just take a moment and type in the group that you're affiliated with and your location in the chat so everybody else can see who else is on tonight. It's just kind of a nice way of making that community connection. And then again, during our time with Colette tonight, please type in your questions during the chat, and Julie and I and Colette as well will refer to them during the Q&A afterwards or during, if they apply to what's being discussed at the moment. Okay, so I'd like to introduce Colette. Colette started her coxswain career in 2008 at NorCal Crew. And over the last 12 years, she's led her crews to 2 first-place finishes at the Under-23 World Championship, 3 first-place finishes at the head of the Charles over 3 different categories: Women's Championship 8, Collegiate Women's Alumni 8, that includes a course record, men's champion 8, and 4 Atlantic Coast Conference Rowing Championship titles, and is a second-team All-American. She's the first and only female coxswain training with the U.S. Men's Training Center in Oakland, vying for a seat in the men's 8 at the 2020 Olympics that will take place in June of next year. She's coxed men, women, masters, youth, Division I collegiate, elite, mixed crews from around the world. Including in tonight's conversation, we have a really special treat. Colette has been approved to share the video audio recording from 2016 U23 Worlds. A lot of those women are currently training at the U.S. Training Center in Princeton, and some of them, as I said earlier, are going to be joining us in January with Kendall Chase for a Petaluma River chat. Please join me in welcoming Colette Lucas-Conwell. And again, welcome, Colette, and just thrilled you could be here with us. And it's just a delight. And we'll go from here and start with all of our questions. Let's just begin with who and what inspired you to join rowing? And and at what point did you become aware that you had a talent for coxswain and that this was something that you wanted to pursue?
Yeah, and thank you so much for having me on. It's always a ton of fun to do these. And, you know, thanks to my mom for introducing the two of us. Really glad to be here.
Yeah.
So in terms of who or what inspired me to join rowing, I had always been very competitive, even though I'm small, you know, I'm 5'4". Woman, I always wanted to be the best at something in sports. And so I tried my hand at everything, tennis, basketball, volleyball, you know, a lot of tall people sports, and always started out the sports thinking, you know, I'm still going to be the best, even though I'm small. And then finding out that you do, you know, being 6'2" as a woman does help, versus being 5'4" woman. So I actually found rowing through my older sister, Melanie. I had just quit swimming, after an unsuccessful career there. And she had said, you know what, maybe, because I'd always loved the water and being outside. She said, why not try this? You know, they have this position called the coxswain. You know, you're actually the right size for it, and could be good at it. And I said, okay, I'll give it a shot. So I tried out, and actually what really drew me in was that so many of the other sports I'd done were very individually focused. And being a part of rowing and being the coxswain in an 8 or a 4, it's like me winning is very dependent on how well my rowers are doing and how we are doing as a boat. And it's a very team sport. I mean, it's the most team-oriented sport there is, in my opinion. So I just immediately was hooked on that, and, you know, definitely had some ups and downs. I mean, the first couple of years at NorCal Crew, I was something like the 5V coxswain or like the third 8 coxswain. Kind of slowly moved my way up. And I guess the point at which I became aware that I might have a talent was actually my senior year of high school. I made the decision to go to Los Gatos Rowing Club. NorCal Crew at the time was switching to more of small boats, like singles, doubles, lightweights, like lightweight double. They won that year, actually. So for me, I was like, I need to get recruited, and I need to be in 8s for that to happen. So I looked at, you know, thankfully in the area we're in, there's a bunch of clubs. It's a bit of a drive, but there was Los Gatos, Marin, and Oakland Strokes. Oakland Strokes would have been a bit of a stretch in terms of driving, coming from Palo Alto High School. But Los Gatos was very, you know, it's a 30-ish minute drive. They said, look, you know, we'd love for you to come try out. So my senior year of high school, switched there, and even though I was brand new to the team, they'd never seen me before. I managed to become the coxswain for the varsity 8 and the lightweight 8 on the women's team, which is not very common. Usually you have one coxswain for the varsity 8, one for the lightweight 8. Both boats wanted me, which to me is when I was like, oh, okay, I can be good at this. That's kind of when I realized, okay, if I really want to pursue this, I really got to go. I can do it. I just have to put my mind to it. So that's kind of when I became aware that I had a talent for being a coxswain, and that's how I got into the sport of rowing.
Nice, nice, cool. Do you want to?
So far, what has been your most exciting race and why? And this will kind of lead to our video or your fancy video that I'm so excited to see.
It's a fun one. And so actually we spoke about this a little bit before everybody came on, but I'm actually going to edit my response. Two really most exciting races. One was actually the 2019 Head of the Charles. Was so much fun, mostly because we sent 2 8s from the training center. One of the 8s was the one that went to Worlds as the men's 8. And then the other one was led by me with 8 rowers who, had just joined the training center, kind of young guys who had been cut or, kind of from all over. And we had such a fun race. We started in the middle of the pack and had to navigate around crews, which I love doing. Had to be really strategic around some turns, around weeks. Had to kind of stick behind the coxswain that was right in front because he refused to yield, and waited until we had a good shot to move. And when we did, it was just amazing. And we had an incredible sprint where we were literally passing, I think it was the Italians at that point, in the last couple 100 meters. That was such a fun and exciting race. But I will say the 2016 under 23s race was fun in that we had so many challenges leading up to the start of that race. I didn't know if my 7C was going to make it through the race, and the fact that she lived onwards was just amazing to me. We had so much adversity going into it, and everyone was so tired. We were still doubling up in races back then. So the women's pair and the women's 4 doubled up into the women's 8. And it was just, we had never led a race ever. Even in the heats, we did not lead from the beginning. And so when we were, 10 strokes in and leading the pack, I mean, it was okay, how can we make this race? How can we make a statement and an impact? So that was a ton of fun too. And with that, if you want to lead with the video, I will say I'm going to mute myself because I don't like hearing my voice. I do it for personal reasons to learn more, but it's still a little cringy.
Okay.
United States.
Squared and buried.
Russia.
Thank
Great
you.
Britain. New Zealand.
Buried.
Australia.
Loose shoulders, all legs.
Germany. Attention.
Look at the light. 3/4. 3/4. 3/4. Length. Oh, fuck yeah. Up high. Sit up. Yep. 44. Let's go up again. Now. Up. Shot. That's it. 45. Nice. In 5, we shift. 4, 3, in 2. 1, 2. Yep. That's it. Holy fuck, we are in the fucking lead. Now, let's chop. Yeah. 7, 8 in 2 shifts. 2 shifts. This is our stride. 3, 250 down. 5, 6. I'm looking at Balfour. 8, chop. 9, 10. Good. 38. I'm looking at bounce seats, Aaron. We are in first. We breathe and go now. Breathe. Yep. That's it. Good. Now I'm looking at Balbo of GB and Russia. Get ready for the 500 move. Middle 4, I want to see a completion of the swing. And guys, we got them out. In 2, 1, 2, middle 4, up, chop. That's it. 500 down. Yep. Good. Middle 4, it's going. Yep, getting ready for a 2-minute move. Foul balls are right behind me. We break open at 2 minutes. Get ready. Yep, we go with the clean swing in 2. 1, 2, now. 1, chop. 2, 2 minute. 3, yep. 4, 5, swing it. Lay back. That's Yeah, Georgia is crushing it, guys. Yeah! This is good. Do the 750. Sit up. Now! Sit up! And guys, we fucking crush their souls. Yeah. No mercy. Sit up. Yup. Getting ready for the big fucking reset through the 1K, and it is game over. Breathe. That's it. 1 unit. In 10 strokes, we reset. 35 and a half. We stay chill. Slam the fucking door. Ready. Swing it. We go leg bombs. USA reset into 1, 2, reset. Legs now. 2, chop. 3, that's 1K. 4, 5, yeah. 6, legs. 7, we shut him down. 8, now. 9, 10, that's it. Swing it now. Yep. Guys, even more. Got about half a length of open. We go for full length, Cassandra and Aaron. Now, sit up. Legs, cha. Yep. In 20 seconds, it's our 4-minute move. Do the 1250. Got him out, Kendall. Here. Boom, cha. That's it. Guys, we keep walking away. Here we go. 4-minute move. Gia and Kendall through the gust. This is the gust. Tuck the blades. 4-minute move. Now, sit up. 5, cha. 4, 750 to go. Yep. 2, let's go, Gia. 1, cha. Yep, now Dr. Curve is going to take us to the last 500. We keep gutting them out, guys. This is going to be a fucking record for 1st to 2nd place. How much open can we get? Lock the blades. Go now. Dr. Curve. Cha. That's it, guys. Swing and sit up. It's going to be gusty for the last 500. Here we go. We're coming up on the last 500. We go. Build on the legs. Up 1. In 5. Ready. In 3. Yeah. 2. Legs now. Legs. Cha. This is the last 500. Yup. Send it now. Redemption for the pair. Go! Cha! Yup! That's it! Hell yeah, guys, that's it! Right on 36. Yup! Good, guys. Get ready to go for the sprint. We're gonna fucking lick our lips and finish them off. Sit up. Yep, this is about 350 to go. Platform now. Go! Cha! Last race together. Yeah! Here, let's go, Ken. That's it, Ken. Yup. Good. Now, Aaron, you're going to take us into the sprint. Into up on the legs. 1, 2. This is the sprint. Legs now. 1. Chop. 2. Legs. 3. Yup. 4. 5. World champions right now. 7. 8. We go clean into 9. 10. Now clean. 1. Chop. 2. Chop. 3. That's it, guys. 4. This is us. 5. 6. Our legacy. 7. And we black out into 1. Ready. Regina. 1. Chop. 2. Blackout. 3. Yup. 4. Chop. 5. To the line. 6. Sit up. 7. Yeah. 8. Last 2. 9. 10. Easy. Wow. Yeah.
Fun race.
All eight, hold water. All eight, hold. Okay. Nice fucking job. Go, stand up, go. I wasn't planning on doing that. Okay.
Even my heart rate was high after that.
Fucking champion, guys. Okay, Georgia, do you need the pill? Thingy? Yep, pass that. Can we get a water? Can you give this to Georgia?
Dr. Curve. So I'm just answering Abigail here. So Dr. Curve was our 6th seat, Sarah Doherty. She was a UW rower. And so throughout that whole summer, we used the, oh God, what are they called? The Empower Orlocks. And, you know, like every practice, we would watch the rowers' curves and make sure that they lined up and all that good stuff. Her curve was substantially larger than everybody else's. Like she was someone who could just lay it down. And so we would call her Dr. Curve because of that, just because she just had so much more power than anybody. And sorry, I guess that was a private message. But yeah, so that's Dr. Curve. And then Georgia, as an explanation, was the 7th seat. She and I rode at UVA together. It was something to do with her electrolytes, but would need like immediately at the end of a race, a Gatorade or like an electrolyte pill or something. Otherwise she would get very sick, like to her stomach kind of thing. So at the end of the race there, when I was like, do you need an electrolyte pill? She was like, yes, I need it. So that was the story there. She was the one who we weren't sure would he be able to race because she wasn't, I don't know if it was the traveling or what, but yeah, was not feeling well, but still stuck it out and, you know, won that.
Wow. Wow. Pretty exciting. Gosh, going into more conversational questions that there's so much there. I'm curious, what are your top 3 priorities as a coxswain that you'll focus on with your crew?
Yeah. Specifically, and this is true of any team, number 1, I mean, aside from safety and that respect, always safety is number 1. Make sure you don't run into anything and are aware of other boats, but steering, no question about it. That is the biggest impact you can have on speed, is oversteering or anything like that. So steering straight on a 2K course is the most important thing. And then it's, you know, second priority, and it's specifically with the men's team right now, but just generally is calling a race and calling practice, you know, to a T. So when I'm in practice with Mike Tatey, it's making sure that I am totally in sync with what he's saying. I say, if he's asking for us to do a certain drill, that we're doing it exactly, you know, right away, exactly what he wants, that we're not getting confused with what he's asking for, that it is super in sync and that we're not wasting any time. And similarly with calling a race, it's, you know, you practice race plan, you have to call it. Your rowers are expecting certain things. Sometimes you have to improvise, but calling a race and practice are second priority. Third, I would say, which is funny because I just said calling a race or practice, is improvising based on what's happening. You know, you can't always, you know, based on the information you're getting, whether it's from your speed coach or what other boats are doing or whatever, you may have to change your race plan. Or, you know, if you're in the middle of a practice and there's a sailboat coming at you, you have to improvise. So that's kind of the third priority to me, is taking in the information around you and improvising as needed. And really that's like a kind of a top skill that coxswains generally need, is being able to absorb information and then either act on it, whether that's choosing what information to tell the rowers that's going to be most effective, or, you know, changing course on a body of water, you know. So those are kind of the top 3 priorities: steering, calling race practice, and improvising as needed based on the information you're getting.
Okay. And just following up there, do you have a plan in terms of your vocal range in a race, and sort of where the plan, you know, how that may be more intense, like almost like a key eye in you know, and then it'll cycle down calmer? Do you have, do you actually sort of strategize in terms of that relative to where you are in the 2K?
Yes, and actually even more so than that tape. You know, if anything, that tape was a calmer version of myself than years before, which is saying something. And it depends crew to crew, but there's always a tone difference, whether it's just the basic baseline tone of just relaying information to you know, so that you can have that backup of when you really need the crew to listen, or you're making a big move, or you need them to hear that, you know, you've slipped back a seat, then you can kind of force your voice out a little bit more and use a different tone. But it's definitely important, you know. Now, I would say when I was in high school, it was like all here. As I got into college in the under 23 team, it was a little bit, you know, I started to calm myself during racing. Now it's mostly calm with some, you know, emphasis on moves or in the sprints. But yeah, so there's definitely a lot of tone intonation that goes into this. And it just comes with practice and asking the rowers too. Like, I might think that I sounded calm, but I totally didn't. So it's asking the rowers afterwards, like, hey, I was working on sounding calmer. Did you feel that? Or do I need to tame it even more? So feedback is really crucial to knowing where you are in your tone intonation.
Cool. Cool.
Along with those lines and like tones and sort of stuff, do you, what's the difference between coxing women versus men?
Yeah.
And yeah, the calls associated with it.
It's interesting because I feel like it's, you know, there's definitely a difference between men and women generally. But the biggest differences I've found have actually been in the technique focuses. So for example, in that race, like you heard, there was a lot of like laying all the way back, like using absolutely every single inch of your body to drive the boat. That's just like such a big focus at UVA on the under 23 women's team. Even when you watch the senior national team on the women's side, it's like every single inch of the body. So a lot of the calls were focused on that versus now with the men's team. And maybe this is just like a Mike thing versus, you know, all men's rowing, but you do not want a 6'8" dude jerking the boat back like that. That would throw the boat off completely. So a lot more of the focus is on, you know, the front end really picking up in that first half of the drive, and then almost just like quiet, super clean, no disturbance of the boat in the back end. And because of those differences, I have found that from switching from women to men's coxing, for one with the women's, there was just so much emphasis on the back end. So like my tones when I was making calls back there were a lot more forceful versus now with the men's team, it's a lot calmer. If I'm going to make a call, it's going to be at the front end, you know, pick up with the legs, sharp front, like it's all going to be focused on that front end. So that's where I've seen the biggest difference. And I think it would probably be true of high school, collegiate, senior national team, masters, just that with men's rowing, and especially when you have tall guys, you just cannot have them ripping the back end. It's just gonna drag the boat down. So I would say it's more so where I'm making the calls and the emphasis is slightly different, men's to women's.
Cool.
Yeah.
And for the coxswains that are in the room tonight, would you say what you say or when you say it? And is there a priority over this? Which do you think, is there one more important than the other, or sort of?
In terms of the like what I say when I say it for between the catch and the finish, or?
I've heard from other coxswains that when you say it seems more significant to them than what you say.
Yeah.
Just the placement of, I don't know if that, but maybe I'm sort of splitting a hair here, but I was just curious if you had a perspective about that.
Yes. And I will say what you say, you know, when you start out rowing, I feel like your vocabulary is huge and you can use these like millions of words to describe different things. Yeah. But as you go into the national team, us coxswains have to really relay what the coach is saying. And so that vocabulary gets really small. Yeah. And so, yes, when you're saying these things becomes paramount because you can only use 10 words, let's say, that the coach is using to describe the front end and the back end. Yeah. Of the stroke. So when you're saying it, definitely key, especially, you know, if you're calling switches or calling moves, etc. Like, you know, and that's also a question to have with the coaches and the rowers is, do you prefer, like some coxswains are very much about, you know, counting strokes at the catch versus people prefer counting at the finish. It's going to vary team to team. It's really what the coach wants and what the rowers feel more comfortable with. Mm-hmm. I know that we've definitely had coxswains come in for a little bit and they call things differently than Julian and I. And it just throws the whole crew off, and practice is weird. And, you know, then the rowers get mad at the coxswain. They're like, Colette and Julian call the changes this way, you know, let's all say it the same way. So it's really more so about just agreeing with the coaches and the rowers on the vocabulary you're going to use and when you're going to say things, so that it's just consistent for the whole team as much as possible. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I just got a question from someone else. What calls are helpful versus not helpful when behind in a race? From a coxswain from North Bay. So he's trying to figure out.
Okay, well, coxswain from behind. I've done it a lot. It's what's unhelpful is getting negative. I mean, this is kind of obvious. Getting negative and lying about how much space is in between you and the boat in front. There is never, you know, it is never helpful for a coxswain to say, oh, we're only 2 seats down when you're 5 lengths down. Like, that's just not helpful. I think being truthful is key. The way that you're conveying it is huge. So, you know, obviously when you're losing, you're usually more stressed out. So I find it helpful to just take a breath, you know, kind of gauge the information you have. How far down are you? You know, how fast is the other boat moving away? Is it possible to catch them? Or should you just keep it internal on what you guys are focusing on? What I have found to be useful is to focus on the split. So let's say that, you know, you're in a 2K race, the other boat's beating you by a length of open, and you've noticed your split just gradually going up. I mean, just stating the facts, like, we're down by a length. You know, our split has gone up 2. Let's work on getting the split back down to that 135 by doing this, whether it's sharpening the catches, cleaning up the back ends, getting a little more legs on the front instead of trying to rip it with the backs, whatever it is. Keeping the focus technical, getting the speed back down for you. Because if you're moving faster, then hopefully you're moving on that other boat. So it's not so much like, let's just try and grab 1 seat at a time from them, because unless you're bringing the split down, you're not going to move at all. So that's, you know, and for different crews, that'll mean different things. Usually by the time we're out racing with any crew, you have like a decided upon, like, okay, we know that in the middle of the race, we start to rip with our backs and the split comes up. We need to keep it focused on the legs in the first 2 inches. And that's how we're going to maintain speed. Kind of agreeing to those things with your different crews. And that takes just time in a lineup. Yeah.
Cool. And so sort of tying into this, how as a coxswain do you track data on your crew? And so, I mean, do you, as a way to sort of keep track of how you can take advantage of the moments to redirect negative thoughts, you know, in the instant that they needed, you know, before they need it, actually. So I'm just curious, do you have a journal of where you note things, observation of teammates? I mean, I'm sure you're just sort of constantly absorbing feedback from them on the ergs, on and off the water. And I was just curious how you know, what your process is for doing that.
Yeah, and for a long time I did write in a journal, you know, anything. It was like erg scores. It was generally like, oh, this person is working on this for this practice, or, you know, Kevin yelled at, you know, Heidi about this today in practice, remind her to keep focus on that. I did do that for a while, but I actually found that I didn't reference those notebooks as much as I wanted to. So I do more of just mental noting. I mean, it's helpful when you have a group of, I mean, right now we have 21 rowers, I think, and we've been together for the last 3 years. It's just kind of building like an internal mental database on these guys, and knowing, you know, talking to them outside of practice about what they think is going well, you know, what they're working on, that kind of thing, but also just generally speaking, making mental notes of what Mike tells the rowers and what he wants them to work on. I just kind of keep that up here. I mean, there's not enough time for me to yell at every single guy about what they're working on. So it's really just picking kind of the top focus that they're each, you know, focused on at the moment. I mean, other data that I just kind of keep an eye on is I do use a Cox orb, but Cox boxes do the same thing now. So after every practice, I upload the data to my computer and I take a look at, especially if we've been doing pieces like 4x1500 or 3x4K or something. And we've done switches just from my own knowledge, looking at, did the boats, you know, thankfully with Cox orb, you can look at graphs of, you know, speed over distance. And just looking at that, I can tell like, oh, when we were with this guy, we actually maintained speed really well throughout the whole piece and we won. We switched rowers and, you know, we slacked in the middle and the other boat walked and we lost that piece. So kind of just making those observations. It's not anything formal. I just, you know, there's too much information for me to write it all down, to be honest. It's more just making mental notes and then just recognizing patterns. You know, I know like one guy on our team, for example, always goes hard in the first 500, but then dies down and then kind of can pull it together in the last 20 strokes. So it's just like, okay, that's just how he goes. And sometimes he wins pieces that way, sometimes he doesn't. So it's just those kind of small noticing patterns and just general observations about rowers. And I think especially if you have 50 plus masters, you're not going to be able to remember all of that. So maybe keeping a journal then. But again, just general patterns. And, you know, especially when you spend a lot of time with these guys, that helps you in a race, knowing that one of your guys is going to go hard in the first 500, you know, at the 500 mark, calling him out and saying, hang on, stay with the guy in front of you. That's how you can start to spot weaknesses and how you can kind of start to predict them in a way.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks.
So I had a personal one. My crewmates and I normally, during like the middle part of the race, we like die down and we have a difficult time kind of regrouping and then we can get back to it. What would you recommend as calls for coxswains to help with that issue?
Yeah. And I've had, I mean, that's always a thing with every crew and different teams attack it differently. So I know that at UVA, for example, we did a, you know, across Division I collegiate varsity eights, everyone did a 1,000 meter call, whether it was like a power 10 or whatever. Two different things we did then. One was for 2 years, we did a 750 and a 1250 move. So 10 strokes at the 750, just getting the split down one, maintain it through the 1K, and then see if you can go down another split at the 1250 so that you can kind of attack opponents before they make their move and throw them off guard and then attack them again as they're coming off their move. And we always had some technical focus with that. It depended on the crew, whether it was, there's always a technical focus, there's got to be, no matter the move you're making. So I think with UVA, it was, you know, maintaining speed through the middle of the drive. You know, like maintain speed through the middle for this 10 ready. And, you know, then you see the split go down. It's all great. The other, you know, different crews do different things. I know one that was pretty successful with us in 2017 was doing a 7-5-7 move, where we actually cut the slide down a teeny bit, like 7-8 slide, for 7 strokes, lengthened it for 5, shortened it again, lengthened, and it just kind of reset what you were doing. So, you know, you're in the slump, you're going, and, you know, you're coming up on the 1,000 meter mark, you know, it's going to be painful, but then it just kind of gave us a little reset. And I think that's the biggest thing, no matter what, in the middle of a race, is doing some kind of reset. Like everyone had one. I know Cal did a 2-minute and a 4-minute move, and, you know, they just focused on sitting up. It's just kind of agreeing with everybody, like, when you hear me say 750, this is what we're going to do. You can't just kind of call it out of the blue in the middle of the race, because the rowers aren't going to be mentally, I think there's some like psychology associated with that. But if they almost have like a point to look forward to, like, oh yeah, at the 4-minute move, you know, 4-minute mark, we're going to do this, you know, it kind of helps them get through the first 4 minutes and then have something to commit to. And then, you know, you have the last couple minutes of the race and you can finish that off. But that was, so there's always something a little bit different with every team. But that's definitely been just giving somebody like a clear marker, or even the trails. It's like, hey, we're going to move after Anderson, giving them a really clear marker of where the move's going to happen and what we're going to do is like hugely helpful. And I've always found very positive feedback when we do it well.
Cool. Do you, like, when you make a plan with your crewmates, do you tell them what you're going to generally call beforehand, before the race, for all your calls, or is it more? Okay.
It's a conversation. So,
okay.
And it depends. Like some crews I've had, like one time I went to the Netherlands to Cox this group of like guys who had competed in like the 1980 or 1970s Olympics. And, you know, they were like, you know, you call the shots, tell us what you're going to do ahead of time. And, you know, we'll just do what you say. Other crews, you'll have rowers who want to give input, and I'm all for that. So it just depends on like what kind of rowers you have, whether they, you know, if they have any ideas, I love that. I'm like, hey, you know, we should talk about race plan. What do you guys want to do in the middle? There's crickets. It's like, okay, well, maybe we could do this and kind of go off that. But it'll definitely depend kind of on the group that you're coxing.
Cool. Thanks.
That actually, so that's one of our questions, was some of the techniques that you use to effectively adjust to new teams and teammates and to build trust with the crew. So if there's anything else you want to add there about that.
Yeah, I mean, and this was true when I jumped into Los Gatos Rowing Club. This was true when I jumped into the men's team. This was true, you know, with U23s and being with a bunch of new people, and you quickly have to get to know each other and, you know, put together a winning crew is, you know, I feel like a lot of coxswains like to think like I have to be authoritative right away. Haven't found that to be super helpful. Really, what helped me with new groups was to just kind of sit back, listen, watch, pay attention, and then ask rowers and coaches questions, like kind of get a feel for the group about what they prefer, you know, what words they like, what words they don't. For example, the U23 women never used to say the word cha ever, but a lot of women in the U23 2016 vote really liked it. So I said it then. I said it once in front of Mike Tatey, never said it again because it was just not not a good response. So it's really just listening to the crew. You know, I'm not a huge like you got to show up and really be the leader like from day one. It's like if you're new to the crew, like learn from the people around you, ask questions of the people who've been there the longest, and that's how you build trust. I mean, that's been true of every team I've been with. Is, you know, how can they possibly trust you if you just show up day one and think you know everything? You have to be humble in how you do it. You have to show up and be ready to learn from the group. So that's been, you know, it's just sit back, listen, and it's kind of nice. It takes the pressure off. You just have to show up, listen to what everybody's doing, ask a few questions. How do you guys like to run things? What words do you like, not like, you know, and then it's trial and error, you know, just try new things, see if they like it, get feedback, make changes right away. Don't wait to be told twice not to do something, make the change. And as long as you can keep making those changes quickly, you can come out on top.
Cool. Oh, sorry. Do you see that question?
I didn't see it.
Okay. If it's okay with you, I'll ask it because it's sort of.
Yeah, go for it.
Yes. This is, I would love to know how you count so well while doing everything else. Are there any other tips to learning to say in 10?
That's me.
Okay.
Yeah. So I just asked, like, you count so well in that video. Like, I have such a hard time. Like, if I say like in 10 something's gonna happen, then I literally have to count all 10 strokes. I really try not to, but then all of a sudden I'm like, wait, what's happening? What number we at? Because I'm talking about technical stuff or I'm steering or so. So I was just, but I know it sounds ridiculous to ask how do you count so well, but I really meant like how do you.
Oh no, it's not at all. It was a learning process. I actually did have a really hard time with counting for a very long time. And then someone was like, wait, you have an instrument right in front of you that does the counting for you. And so it does take some time though to get used to just relying on your Cox box. Like I will say some of the Cox boxes are GPS based and they skip strokes. sometimes.
Okay, because
So
that
you
was
just,
my question. Is it count from the catch or from the finish? Like, I've never paid attention long enough. Like, yeah, so I should clearly, but I just, if you have any
and
tips.
it depends because some Cox boxes are connected to the impeller, some of them are connected to the seat, and there's literally a magnet under the seat that counts. And depending on where the magnet's placed, it'll count it somewhere different. So it's just once you get in the boat, figure out how it's all counted. But yeah, learning to just rely on your Cox box or Cox orb or whatever instrument you use to count strokes, very helpful. Like it did take some getting used to because I was so used to trying to just count everything in my head. Rely on the tools you have. Takes a little getting used to, but it's there for a reason.
Thank you, and thank you for understanding the question. How do you
No, it was a struggle for a while, trust me.
You want to go for it, Julia?
Sure. Along with that, what is your current favorite drill and why? Like based off of all the different crews that you've coxed for.
Honestly, keeping it simple. And it's been different again, just because of the different technical focuses between the crews that I've been with. With the men's team, I mean, it's just, we keep it simple. It's like push off the dock, do some quarter slide rowing, you know, by pairs, all boat, all that. And then go to full slide. I mean, that is just like a magical sometimes. You do quarter slide for long enough and then extend to full slide. It's like, wow, we're all matching up. Amazing. Something about it. I don't know. But I think, you know, I do enjoy doing cut the cake or rusties or whatever everybody calls them. Especially if, you know, whether the guys are distracted or it's been a long row, it just kind of gets everybody, you know, it kind of forces you to focus on your timing together. So I do enjoy cut the cake. But we did have a fun one, and this is just a fun one with UVA, is at the end of every year on our last practice on the way in, we would do the flying phoenix, which sounds ridiculous. So the way it worked, and I just love this drill just because I have memories tied to it. I would never try this with anybody else because it would just feel weird without Kevin Sauer there. But we would take like a 10 full pressure, everything. And then every 5, 6, 7 strokes, drop a pair and they would gunnel and put their foot over it. So, you know, you take 5 strokes, bow pair gunnels. The other 6 are still hammering it out. And then 3 and 4 gunnels, and then 5 and 6, and then the stern pair. And then like when everybody's gunneling and the boat is set and the blades are off the water, we like all put our hands up and we're like, go, go. You know, we act like phoenixes. But that was always just like a fun, like last 10 of our year as an 8. Not really a drill, more just like a fun activity. But had to mention that one. That one's great.
Yeah, we had a similar one where we would do like a full circle of the oar and then place it in.
Holy.
And it was potential for catching some crabs.
Yeah, potentially injuries.
Yes.
But still fun. And I see
Definitely.
Mary has a question in the box. Do you want me to answer it, or do you guys want to?
Well, sure. Say it
How do you
out.
determine how much is enough, particularly in a head race? Are you making calls the whole time, or sometimes just quiet if the boat is running well? How do you decide when you really need to be using your voice versus not? Especially now over the last over the last 3 years, a lot more quiet than anything. Especially in practice. I mean, the coach is coaching. I'm not trying to detract from that. So especially in practice, it's literally just calling switches and letting the coach do his thing. For racing, there was definitely a lot of quiet time just because, and I mean, I'm only thinking of the trials because that's literally the last race we've had. Yeah, you need some quiet time so that you're able to make an impact when you do speak, especially with going around turns and crews and all that. If you're just constantly talking, like the rows are going to tune you out at some point. And if you, especially when you're making a big move, having like 3, 4, 5 strokes quiet before making that call is like very impactful. And, you know, especially if you've been quiet throughout practice, like the rowers get used to you using your voice only if it's necessary and only if it's, you know, actually going to add value there's no point in just yabbering the whole time. I think that's something I used to do a lot in college and even on the U23 team, but I'm learning more and more to speak less. If I do speak, it has to be to add speed to the boat. It can't just be to, you know, fill my own mind.
And do you lead crews through like visualization pre-racing?
So we did and this is depending on coaches and crews. I have in 2015 and 2016, Wes Ng, who was our coach then, was really into visualization. So we dabbled in it in 2015, but, you know, kind of made it a more structure to it in 2016. What we would do is, as soon as the crew was selected and, you know, we knew who was going to be in the 8, and we started having our eyes set on Rotterdam, before every practice, actually, we would sit down and, you know, close our eyes, and throughout the weeks leading up to the race, every rower would call the race. You know, not like coxing it, but just, it would be, you know, like Kendall would lead us one day before practice, and, you know, it'd be like 10 minutes and then we get on the water, but everybody would close their eyes, get comfortable, and she would call, you know, from the light's red, eyes on the light, ready for it to go green, you know, the boats are off, like just calling it kind of calmly. And I do something similar for every Charles, actually. This is just kind of a habit I've gotten into. We usually go out before racing, whether it's the day before, 2 days before, and I call the race then when we're practicing. We're not actually going hard the whole time, but that's just something I do. And the rowers like to prepare for the race is just, you know, we'll be going just like steady state throughout the course, and I'll just call it as, you know, like, you know, we've started bow ball number 10, you know, this is when we take a 10, that kind of thing. We'll maybe do a power through weeks just to practice that turn, but otherwise it's just kind of visualizing what that day is going to look like, you know, people being ready for us to like maybe lose a little bit at the beginning and then us have to gain back at the end. But, you know, for every visualization, you always win. I don't think anybody does a visualization and loses at the end. So that's just, keep that in mind. But no, so that's definitely it's been a big part of my cruise in 2015, 2016. But it's dependent on the crew. For some crews it's helpful, for some it's not. So just being attentive to what coach wants and what the rowers want. Yeah.
Along with that, do you have some tips on steering? How do you prepare yourself before a race? I know like Head of the Charles is something totally different than a straight 2K course, but in general, what do you do to prepare?
I mean, generally just as much time as possible. And, you know, you can't always bet on this. A lot of times I've been with crews that are just kind of thrown together a week or two beforehand. So, but as much as possible, if it's possible, being in your lineup in the boat that you're going to race in, different shells steer very differently. So just practicing in that boat is very helpful. Most of the time you will, but I mean, for example, with U23s, you show up, you know, halfway across the world a week before racing and you're thrown into this brand new Empacher. I remember in 2015, our steering was completely broken. And literally we were practicing and the boat's going like this. And I was like, I know something's wrong. I'm not this bad at steering, I swear. And, you know, then the Empacher guy was like, oh yeah, the thing is completely bent out of shape. So it really is like super helpful. The best thing you can do for your steering before a race is to be able to practice in your crew in the shell that you're going to race in, so that you can know, like, you know, maybe you call a 10 and like one side is definitely better at taking you around a turn than the other side. Like that's helpful information for your steering. Or, you know, especially for 2K races and starts, sometimes you have a bowman who just goes berserk and completely throws off, you know, the first 5 strokes, and all of a sudden you're in the buoy line. So like knowing that information is that's the best thing you can do for your steering. I mean, obviously there's how you hold the rope and all that, but you know, what's going to have the most impact is just knowing how your boat steers and how your rowers impact in how straight of a line you can go in. Yeah.
So have you ever done anything that was different or maybe even seemed reckless that where it actually worked out and allowed you to win the race?
I again, that 2019 Height of the Trials race was really close in some instances. Like I wouldn't say I was reckless, but I definitely pushed the limit in terms of how close I got to some boats and how close I was to, for example, like the green buoy for the last big turn. Was like right on the edge of that. But I mean, it worked out. We ended up winning by like this much. So it's, I would say that's probably the biggest risk I've taken has been in head racing. I mean, in 2Ks, there's only so much, you know, that you can do wrong and be reckless with. I mean, your calls can be reckless in a way. You can call the sprint totally off, you know, call it 40 strokes before the end versus 30, and then you've got some, you know, that would be disastrous. You have to call the sprint right up until the last stroke. But yeah, I'd say that 2019 race, I mean, there's some pictures out there where I'm like, wow, I was literally an inch away from that Coxing stern. Like, did I cut it a little close? Maybe, but it paid off. It did turn out well. So I'm glad I took those risks. Well, and I'd spent enough time in those types of shells and everything that I could gauge the distance, but it was definitely, there was a little uncertainty in whether we would make it out alive or not. And we did, so that's great.
You were used to driving that Maserati, huh?
Yeah, exactly. More like a Toyota Camry, but I'll take a Maserati one day.
Along with that, what does your warm-up entail with your cruise? Dry land and on the water? I'm guessing it differs from crew to crew, but in general.
A warm-up is always a good idea. I think right now, and again, it's very dependent. Some rowers prefer to do their own warm-ups. Like right now with the team before we go on the water, some guys like to show up and just push off the dock. Others like to stretch and do all that beforehand. So it's up to the individual. You know, they know what's best for them. With some coach input, depending on, you know, if they have injuries or whatever else. But generally, I mean, I think of the warm-ups we do once we show up the dock. It's, you know, you do drilling for a few minutes. You do some steady state for 10, 15 minutes, you know, nothing incredibly hard, just getting the crew to row together, depending on whether we're doing race pieces that day or not. You know, we'll get some power strokes in at rate, whether it's, you know, so like a typical day, if we've got 2/8 out and we're doing a 3x4K, we will shove off the dock, do some quarter slide by 4s, 6s, all 8, go into some steady state, a couple minutes at 18, a couple minutes at 20, a couple minutes at 22. And then we'll stop, make sure that everything's good with the boat. There's, you know, slide's not about to pop off in the middle of the piece, the oar lock's closed, all that. And then we'll do, you know, if the rate's like a 32 that day, we'll do some 3 and 10s or 5 and 15s to build up the rate. And, you know, towards, you know, we'll do it up to a certain point. We'll maybe do like 2 at the cadence we're going to be at that day, like 2 5 and 15s or 5 and 10s. But I'll ask the guys, I'll be like, hey, do you guys feel ready? Do you guys want to do a little bit more? How do you guys feel? Like, it does have to be a conversation with the rowers at some point about, do they feel warmed up? Do they need more drilling? Especially if there's going to be switches, you want to make sure that the guys feel warmed up and ready to go. So that's the general, I mean, I talk about on the water warm up mostly because that's what we've done. On land, I mean, the guys have been erging at home, so God knows what they're doing. Hopefully they're warming up a little, especially if they're doing pieces, but yeah, that's the general on the water warm up.
Cool. So kind of going back to the, well, your position as a coxswain, do you have suggestions for sort of walking that tightrope between the coach and the crew, or do you consider it a tightrope, or how do you kind of, how do you see your role to sort of navigate what probably would come up, the difference between what the coach planned and what the reality is when you're in the boat?
I mean, I think coach knows best. Follow what the coach asked for. I mean, definitely when you're in high school and even the first few years of college, you're not, you know, I would say you're not mature enough yet to really see yourself as like the right-hand man to the coach. So like you associate yourself more with being a teammate and relying on your team and then that aspect. But I think as you or especially for me, like as I got into my 3rd year and 4th year of college and with the under 23 team and all that, it's a lot more supporting what the coach is doing, being in sync with what they're looking for. And, you know, coach is the coach makes the decision at the end of the day on who's the coxswain. So it's how in sync can you be? They probably have a lot more experience than the rowers do. So really relying on them for, you know, guidance and making sure that we're all running a tight ship and making their life easier as much as possible. So that's kind of where, you know, I've seen myself throughout my coxing career. I really associated myself with my teammates earlier. Now it's closer to like 50-50, maybe like 60-40 towards being closer to just helping the coaches out, just because the rowers are so, you know, they're not super independent, but they know what's best for them. You know, they don't need someone like me yelling at them all the time. Like they can figure it out on their own. So I'm just more there to help as much as I can. So kind of falling more into, I wouldn't say assisting coach, but assisting the coach. Yeah.
Cool.
It can be a tightrope though, depending on, you know, which phase you're, I mean, like at UVA, it was a bit of a tightrope, and then we kind of got it into a groove and it worked out in terms of just being 50-50. But again, it all depends on the team, the coach, and the rowers.
There's, Julie, I think I'll just chime in here because there's a follow-up question to that. Somebody said they'd love to know what you focus on when you're in the launch with the coach. What do you try to learn, and how can the Cox use that time efficiently?
So for us, just in terms of like what we do, you know, our practice, we're usually chasing down boats and trying to get video of them from every angle so that they can later watch it. For me, it's the biggest thing I pay attention to is what is the coach coaching them on? What drills is he asking those boats to do? Usually there's an intent behind, you know, an intent as to why he's having those specific crews do a drill and not others. So it's really just kind of, again, it's that mental noting that I mentioned earlier, is just what is each guy working on? What are their focuses? How, you know, right now we're just chasing down singles, pairs, fours, etc. So it's a little bit different than if we were, you know, in eights or cox fours or something like that. But that's really all it is. I mean, it's relatively simple. I'm just listening to what the coach is coaching on, and specifically, more specifically, what it is for each rower and each crew, and just kind of making notes of that, noticing patterns, that kind of thing.
Nice, thank you.
Sorry about that. My internet is a little spotty. Welcome to Zoom life. That was me all last quarter. I don't know if you talked about this, Jessica, but how do you stay fit as a coxswain, and how do you integrate it with your training with your crews?
So it's so in high school, I would usually, because we did do a lot of erg workouts, I would work out on my own during that time, whether it was like getting on a stationary bike, whatever it was. I've always enjoyed working out generally, and I do find it useful in, you know, how can you ask a rower to push themselves harder if you yourself have never experienced that? Like, you do have to have some sense of like being fit and working out and what that feels like. In college, I did, because I had a little more time on my hands between like rowing and studying, I would do the weight workouts with the rowers, which they actually, no other coxswain had ever done that with them. But I was like a first year, it was like more than anything, I just didn't know. I showed up to the weight workout and I just like stood at one of the weight racks and I was like, okay, so what's the workout? And they're like, usually our coxswains don't weight lift. And I was like, well, I'm here, so like, let's make it happen. I actually was quite good at deadlift. I think it's because I have shorter legs than most rowers. But so that I would do. And then when we had erg workouts, I would be on the stationary bike or treadmill. But nowadays we're on the water all the time, and then the guys do their ergs on their own. So for now, I've really gotten into running mostly. And I will say one of the good things about COVID is it's given me a little more flexibility with my time. So, you know, we'll wrap up practice in the morning, and then depending on what my meetings look like, I'll either get like a 5-mile run right when I get home or like later in the evening. You know, for myself, it's like I don't need to bulk up and do weightlifting. I enjoy doing it at UVA. I didn't necessarily bulk up. I looked the exact same, but it was fun to do some weightlifting. I think generally, if I were to focus on anything as a coxswain, it's, you know, like back strength, core strength to hold yourself together in the boat. But yeah, for me, it's just, you know, stay generally fit. Like I run 5-6 times a week. I enjoy mountain biking when I can. That's kind of like a new habit I'm into now. I just learned to surf with my sister the other day. So just generally staying fit. I think, you know, the rowers appreciate it when you work out with them, if that's possible. And if it's, you know, you're on the water all the time, it's just for your own health. I mean, it's good for your mental health. It's good for your general health. Like I stay fit. And I've known a lot of coxswains who do that too, just for their own mental health and physical health as well. So that's been my, right now it's running mostly, but it depends year to year on what I'm picking up in terms of sports.
Nice. Do you guys keep track of your, you know, the specifics in terms of nutritional requirements and such? I mean, I'm assuming so, but do you have any sort of protocol or regimen?
Not so much. No, not so much protocol. I mean, we have a nutritionist that's available to us if we have any questions, Liz Fusco. So she works with the men's and women's team. So if we have questions, we can go to her, but mainly, again, it's up to the individual. I think nutrition is not something we're going to get too nitpicky about. As long as you're not taking any supplements that you shouldn't, you know, then we're good. But most of the guys, I mean, some of them are in their mid-30s, like they know what works best for them, whether it's taking a shake before practice or not, or something like that. I think the only times we've ever, in my experience, ever had to step in terms of nutrition have been for like athletes who, like, for example, Georgia, who wasn't getting enough electrolytes, and, you know, that was becoming an issue in terms of her performance. And so had to jump in, coxswains had to be aware, that kind of thing. But it really is, it's up to the individuals. We have resources available to us if we need them, which is great. I personally know myself enough and have a pretty boring day to day what I eat. So I just kind of stick to that. But for the guys, it's just, you know, they eat what they do, burritos after long workouts, and that's, and they're happy. So yeah, that's kind of the gist of it.
Keep it simple. Yeah,
keep it simple. I just saw actually my mom's comment.
I know. Do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, sure. Maybe share what it was like to jump into a boat that you've never raced in with a new crew, like Roy River Camp or the UVA alumni boat at the head of the Charles. Especially, so both of those were really fun. The Roy River Camp was that race in the Netherlands. It's a 3-part extravaganza. I'm forgetting the distances. It's something like you race a 10K and then a 250 on the same day, back to back. And the following day you do like a 2K. I forget. The distances are, you know, something like that. And the guys were all Olympians from different countries. So we had like an Italian, we had a couple Americans, we had some Dutch guys. They all just kind of came together. Like this one guy was like, hey, I'm going to get this crew of guys who rode at the Olympics in the 80s. And let's race this. And then similarly with the UVA alumni boat, this is like you jump in like days before the race together. Those are instances where, like, as a coxswain, it's like, okay, we haven't rode together as a crew. Let's just, this is going to be the race plan. You kind of take the helm at that point and say, you know, this is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to practice. And everybody appreciates it. Same thing with the UVA alumni boat at the head of the Charles. You know, you had some Canadian Olympians, you had some US Training Center girls there, girls who had just graduated, and we're like, hey, let's jump in this boat. I just kind of was like, all right, this is what we're going to do the day before the race. This is how we're going to warm up. And this is going to be the race plan. Are we good? Cool. And then went with it. Ton of fun, both of those races. I mean, still hold the course record for the Alumni 8. So I'm going to hold that dearly. So that's fun. It was just a good year for racing, honestly. But yeah, those, and again, still listening to the guys. Like I know for the Netherlands race, the Italian guy was my stroke seat and he was very chatty, but you got the sense from the other guys that it was like, Colette, we trust you, you're the coxswain, just make the plan, we'll go with it. So taking orders from at the time 23-year-old when they're all 60 plus guys, I'm sure was odd for them, but it went well. We ended up winning our age category, so that was great. And I see a message from Abigail. What are your post 2021 Olympic plans?
Yes.
Well, if the coach will still take me, I would love to try out for 2024. I mean, it just feels like we had such a weird Olympic cycle with, Tokyo being moved a year and all that. And I'd always gone into the national team knowing that it wasn't going to be a one cycle thing for me. Just like with most coxswains, they end up sticking around for 2-3 cycles.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as the team will have me, would love to stick it out through 2024, which will be in Paris, which is actually where I was born. So like return to the homeland. And then we'll see about 2028. I mean, that's a little far in the future for me, but that's kind of the plan, is as long as we're still in Oakland training and, I'm still invited to be on the team, then trying out for 2024. That'll be lots of goals. And I guess, do you want to go through, I'm seeing a few, Godspeed.
Yeah, we've got just a few more on our list, and if you want to address Mary's, I guess the recent one.
How do you cope with nerves, and do you get nervous? Yes, before races, and if so, what do you do with that? The most helpful thing I ever learned was from Wes in 2015 in Plovdiv. I swear to God, I was having a heart attack before the race. I was so nervous because we had gone second, very close second in our race for lanes. And, me being 20 something, I was like, oh, it's all my fault. Like, how are we going to win this? Like, it will have been the first time in God knows how long that the women haven't won this race, the US women. Mm-hmm. And Wes just kind of like sat down with me and he's like, just breathe. Simple, but it really, really helped me out. And I had to be at the course early anyways to like weigh in and check over the boat and all that. But so the rowers weren't there. It was just me and Wes. And he was like, just like, take some deep breaths, it's all going to be okay. Take some deep breaths when you get to the start line as well, before the, goes off. And it's something that I'm doing more and more these days. Like, I've a huge proponent of using Headspace. I'm a big fan of it. Just to kind of clear the mind, and you're always accepting the fact that like I'm always going to be nervous before a race, like for the Charles, before Worlds, before like any race I've ever had. I've always been nervous, but just breathing a little bit and kind of relaxing. Not talking too much about the race is also helpful. I find that like if we try and like really dive into the details before we shove off, that just does not help. Like you have the race plan, just breathe, focus on staying calm. And especially the rowers are going to look to the coxswain, if they're calm, you're going to be calmer. So kind of showing that as much as I can. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. You got the next one, Julia?
Yeah. How do you manage time between a full-time job and training for the Olympics on top of managing all the changes with COVID?
So that has been, I will say I've been very, very fortunate to have a fantastic employer that is very flexible. So the Oakland, I've been working with the A's since June 2018 with the Oakland A's, and they have been so flexible. Like, at one point we were practicing at 11 a.m. and in the middle of a work day, and I was like, hey, I have to do this. They're like, that's cool. We'll cheer you on as you row past our office. I was like, okay, great. So I will say I've been very, very fortunate to have an employer who not only is flexible, but like super understandable. If I have to go to Chula for 3 months, they're like, yep, go for it. We'll support you. So that's been incredibly helpful. And you know, Mike is also very attentive, like in sync with us about, you know, if there's like a very important meeting we have to go to or a phone call, like he'll adjust the rowing schedule. And it's really, I mean, I have to say it's tough. We have 20 something guys with different work schedules. You know, that it's a tough job to try and manage that. So as much as possible, it's like, I take it upon myself to be like, okay, guys, to make sure my meetings don't conflict with practice and we'll be good. And if I really have to have a meeting, then I'll talk to Mike about, you know, hey, like, there's a meeting I can't move. Like, is it okay if I go and skip this practice? And he's always been very flexible with that. So I have to say that's been very helpful. But in terms of just time management, I think it's not as much time management as it is just when I'm on the water, I focus on what's going on there. Like 100% just forget about anything I have to do that day at work. And then when I'm at work, forget about rowing, like be very focused on what I'm doing there. And I find that if I can do that, the better I can do that, the more I can get done. Like if I'm, you know, replaying practice in my mind at work, I'm not going to get the things done that I need to before I have to be back at practice that night. And then I'm just more stressed and all that. If I can just kind of separate the two worlds, you know, be super focused on what's going on in practice and then be super focused on what's going on at work, I can manage that well. And I mean, this is just more of a personal thing, but like I have a million lists laying around and I'm a huge list maker. So, you know, that's how I keep myself organized, is just writing down everything I have to work on at work that day. And, you know, if like I'm still thinking about practice and it's like 11 a.m. at work, like maybe I'll write down like, what am I thinking about at practice? So it's just out of my mind and I can move on with it. So that's been kind of the best way I can manage that. And with COVID, I mean, there's been so many changes. It's just, you know, not getting stuck on like, oh, why is this happening? Like, whatever. It's like, okay, this is what we're doing. Okay, moving on. So whether it was like not going into the office now, we closed our office at the A's. I think it was like the first day that they put in a shelter in place. The president of the A's was like, nope, office is closed. We don't want to put anybody at risk. So that actually made it easier for me in terms of rowing. But again, with rowing, we immediately went into a shelter in place as well. And then we started having a couple singles out and then a few more boats. But, you know, if anything, it's actually given me more flexibility. I don't have to commute. I don't have to get ready for work. I don't have to go to baseball games. That was like, I have to say, the days when I had to be at morning practice, in the office, at evening practice, and then go to a 4-hour baseball game were very long days and weeks. But caffeine got me through it. So it's doable. You just gotta stay focused on what's happening in front of you.
Oh my God. Well,
Yeah,
so
those were intense.
I was going to transition to the next question, which is, you know, how are your coxswain skills transferable into your current career? Sounds like coffee.
Oh, very transferable. I think, you know, again, like I feel so grateful that I have my job at the A's. They so appreciate, and these are things that I learned in rowing that I transferred to the workplace, is just like my work ethic. And again, I think it does help to have like, I have to be somewhere before work and I have to be somewhere after work. I have this amount of time to get stuff done.
Yeah.
Like anytime I'm given a project to work on, I get it done as quickly as humanly possible, just because I have limitations. So that's, you know, something you see as a skill in rowers a lot that definitely transfers to the workplace. But also just working on teams with people who have different personalities. I'm the only woman in my department, and I'm also, I'm pretty sure, like the second youngest. I'm relatively young for our front office. Baseball in general is a relatively older front office culture. But the fact that in practice, in rowing, I'm already used to being the only girl, and have to work with guys who sometimes are older than me or whatever, and have to like command their respect. Like that's kind of helped me in my job with when I deal with like politicians or nonprofits or other corporate partners, or, you know, our baseball operations department. Like that just ability to work with different types of people on different problems and getting it resolved quickly is like a huge skill to have. that I honestly only could have learned in rowing, and being a coxswain specifically, and leading teams through kind of how do we resolve these things with people who have these different kind of you know, strengths, and how do we work all these strengths together. So yeah, fully all my coxswain skills are transferable to current career and, you know, future aspirations. So
Yeah, nice,
Yeah.
cool.
Cool. For the coxswains listening tonight, do you have any suggestions on where to find coxswain specific coaching for growth opportunities, like online resources or books or any other things?
So I'll have to pull up the books. When I first started out coxing, I bought 2 books. I think one of them was called like Coxing 101, and there was another one, and I'll send it to you guys, but I read those books religiously, so I didn't know what I was doing. So that was really helpful, was those 2 books. But then also I would say I back then spoke to a lot of national team coxswains. So ninthseed.com, that's Mary Whipple's website. She was super helpful when I started out coxing, and just giving me general advice. And even when I started the U23 team, she was like, okay, you're going to have 2 weeks to show your worth to the team. Like, you're going to have to make it count. Gave me some very like clear advice there. Sparksrowing.com is another coxswain resource that's out there. Happy to connect with people as well, directly. If there's anybody on this call who like wants to connect, I'm happy to share resources as well. But those are kind of those 2 websites. And there's another one that I've actually very much enjoyed reading. I think it's called, is it Ready, Set, Row? No, it is Ready, Set, Row. There's a blog out there for coxswains that I actually really enjoyed, because she really goes into the details of, you know, races, like what equipment to have, like all that stuff. So I'll find that blog and send it to you guys, but there's a lot of material to read over in there as well.
Nice, thank you. And so we're starting to wrap up here, and so I thank you so much for just taking all of our questions, and hopefully it hasn't felt like we've been grilling you, but we're sort of like, as much information about your coxing experience as possible. But just lastly, are there any salient points that you'd like to touch on that, you know, hasn't been covered tonight that you'd like to share with everybody?
I think, you know, the only 2 things I would add to everything I've said, because I know I've been talking a lot. One phrase that we always use at UVA that's kind of carried me through my entire coxing career is humble and hungry. You know, there's always something more to learn. There's always, you know, more out there for you to learn. And that's always been a big thing for me, is humble and hungry, kind of always learning more as much as I can. And then just keeping it simple. I mean, the simpler you can make it as a coxswain, the better. If you can steer straight, call the race, you're 90% of the way there. So it's really just focusing on like what is going to make the crew faster. And it's very, very simple. It's about doing them well and doing them always. If you can steer straight and call the race 100% of the time, like, you're golden. So that's it, really. Humble and hungry, and keep it simple.
Great. Okay, nice. And if people want to unmute themselves to thank Colette or you know, share any responses, feel free.
Someone in the chat said, is it Ready All Row blog?
Let
Ready
me find it.
No worries.
I think it was Ready All Row, but I could be totally wrong, because I see all these like rowing pages. I'll find it and send it to everybody.
Okay.
I'll share it with the 2 of you, and you can share it to them.
Yeah, sounds good. If you send it to me, and I'll send it.
I'm gonna have to do some digging. I'm just gonna be typing into the Google search bar like coxswain blog, and then like scrolling through and finding the one I was thinking of. So I'll send it to everybody.
Okay, and I'll send out your email with that too, in case people want to get in touch with you. Yeah, cool. Well, Colette, it's just been really special to have you, and just truly appreciate your time and all that you shared tonight. It's very rich information, and I'll be going back to the video to, you know, review and explore and take more notes. Yeah,
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was a ton of fun being here, and I loved all the questions. You know, and I'll send all that information over to you guys. But otherwise, enjoy your Tuesday evening, everyone. It's already
Okay.
6:30.
And you're
Wow.
seeing all the thank yous that you're getting, everybody?
Yeah. Oh. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Thanks, Jessica and Julie too. Woohoo.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
guys.